David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
If we want to have a conversation about things that should not be for profit, healthcare is obviously on this list, and we've been talking about that for years, and that seems to often be the one that is the most obvious to the largest number of people, although there's still some debate about that in some political circles. We could talk about whether education should be for profit. We could talk about whether student lending should be for profit or certain types of housing or whatever else. But increasingly, we should be talking about the internet, which at this point is really just a utility, which underlies almost everything we do at this point. And I'm going to probably end up repeating this again, but to be a full participant in 2019 society and economy, you effectively need access to the internet, and probably high-speed internet at that. And there are individual towns that have done what's called municipal broadband. But the reason that they've done this is that usually those towns are too small for the big internet service providers to want to come in and set up shop and be the monopoly provider in those municipalities. And so I was thrilled to see that 2020 Democratic presidential candidate and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren put out her plan yesterday for an internet public option, along with her plan, by the way, to bring back net neutrality. And as we've talked about with Medicare for All, a public option is better than nothing. It may not be the ideal, and with internet, it's probably similar, but I still want to deal with this in detail today because it could be a really big improvement over what we have. And here is Elizabeth Warren's idea. You pass a federal law to prevent states from restricting towns that want to do public broadband. That's number one. Number two, you do a federal grant for $85 billion, which will be set up to cover 90% of the costs for utility co-ops, nonprofits, cities, and counties that want to lay fiber for their own broadband networks. The federal government will subsidize 90% of it, so the city, town, co-op, whatever, only has to pay for 10% of it. For-profit entities would not be eligible for that grant, which will push a lot of internet service over to nonprofits and co-ops and municipalities, which would be great. To qualify for the money, the organization that is looking to do this is going to have to agree to provide at least one affordable plan for low-income people, a special low price to increase access to internet, particularly for low-income people. And meanwhile, Elizabeth Warren would also restore net neutrality. She would appoint commissioners, which would regulate the internet as a common carrier. That's a huge, huge thing. So the breaking news here, which is not breaking news to lots of people in my audience, is that both sides aren't the same on many issues. When they are, I tell you, I've been crystal clear that too many issues have Republicans and Democrats basically working together to maintain the status quo and to reinforce that status quo. When Democrats require criticism, I'm there criticizing them. But on lots of important issues, the two parties are not the same. One issue we've talked about already, and could it ever be more clear than now under Donald Trump rather than Hillary Clinton, choosing judges in the United States, Supreme Court justices and lower level judges, as we talked about on the bonus show this week. Donald Trump's power to do that has had such a significant impact that will be long lasting. Donald Trump's judicial choices more celebrated in the Supreme Court, but also in lower level courts, as we've talked about, will have an effect on the judiciary of the United States for decades to come. Hillary Clinton would have been very different on that. You might not like her position on whatever, but Democrats and Republicans drastically different on that. It's very similar with the internet regulation and net neutrality. In 2018, all Democrats and 3 Republicans voted to restore net neutrality, in the House. A few months ago, 231 Democrats and 1 Republican in the House voted to restore net neutrality. And then Mitch McConnell, Republican Senate Majority Leader, blocked it from even coming up in the Senate at all. So we need to support candidates with the right views on this issue. I love that Elizabeth Warren, I've made no secret, I think it's great that she's been running one of the most substantive campaigns of 2020 so far. Slowly but surely creeping up in the polls, and she did it again in a couple of recent polls, which I don't have time to talk about today, but maybe we'll deal with on Monday. she has been doing that with substantive policy proposals, no cheap shots, no, debate kill shot attempts the way some other candidates have been doing, just policy, detailed policy, which she's increasingly good at explaining in clear and direct terms. And that's a really good thing. So bottom line, in 2019, you essentially need internet, and I would argue not just internet, but high-speed internet to fully participate in society and in the economy, period, flat out. Thus, it should be a public utility. Anything short of that falls short of the goal, but these public option programs, like what Elizabeth Warren is suggesting here, are absolutely great ideas. I think that legally they are quite simple. So when Elizabeth Warren talks about, I want to pass a wealth tax, okay, you could like the idea, not like the idea, think it's the right way or the wrong way to reduce inequality, think that inequality isn't an issue, but legally it will be very complex to get a wealth tax passed. That's just the reality. This public option internet plan and the reinstatement of net neutrality would not be legally complicated. It could be complicated in terms of lobbyist opposition and massive ad dollars lobbying just average people to be against it, and massive lobbying dollars lobbying politicians to be against it. That will be complicated. But when it comes to the legality of doing it, there are not constitutional issues, there are not commerce issues or any other issues that I am aware of. It's merely the political will, and that's why this is absolutely fantastic. Let me know what you think about these and other net neutrality and internet utility ideas. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show, and the David Pakman Show is now on Twitch at twitch.tv/David Pakman. Hope you'll follow us there and subscribe with Twitch Prime if you have an Amazon Prime account.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Matthew Mitchell and Bretta Rambo. Matthew and Bretta, really appreciate your support. Join them at www.joinpakman.com. Membership, the number one way still to support the David Pakman Show. Coupon code available, which will save you 40%. That's This Is 2020. And if you stay with us for a long time, I will mention you again. And today I'm mentioning Martin Scherschwitz. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, who's our longtime sustaining member of the day. Martin has been with us almost 5 years. 5 years of David Pakman Show membership. That's a big deal. Thank you to all of you. And remember that you can also contribute via Patreon at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Okay, there are people very eager to get on and ask some questions. The phone number is 617-830-4750. Let's start today with our caller from the 806 area code. Who's calling today from 806?
Hey, David. How are you?
Good. Who's this?
This is David Corona. I'm actually located in El Paso.
Really? Okay. Well, interesting to hear from you. What's going on?
Hey, so do you think now after these unfortunate mass shooting here, do you think Republicans will, now that they have more pressure to pass a bill to centralize the background checks, do you think that Mitch McConnell will come back and pass a clean bill, or do you think they're going to try to tie it to an immigration bill that Trump wants to do?
We're already seeing the idea floated of tying it to an immigration bill, which I think is disgusting and wrongheaded. I've seen that it seems as though Republicans are sort of coming around on the idea of these red flag laws, which are, quite frankly, I mean, there's just so much more that needs to be done. But I do generally agree with you that it seems that the pressure at this point is getting to the point where they'll have to do something. It may end up getting them more of what they want on immigration, though, if they successfully tie it. So, I mean, it's just a complete and total mess, quite frankly, David.
I agree. I think they are going to try to tie it to an immigration. Unfortunately, probably will not pass.
What's happening locally there in El Paso? Like, what's the local conversation about gun laws that's happening now in the wake of the shooting?
Everyone's on board that we need to centralize the background. We need to have more thorough background check, whether to kind of make it more like the getting your concealed, where you have to go through a class, you have to renew, you have to, of course, not be a felon as you're continuing to renew. I think that's all who I talk to. That's what they are on board and want to do. Even Republicans.
That's
even,
what I was going to say. Can you say, do you know whether Republicans also want that in El Paso?
Oh yeah, I've talked to one yesterday. He was on board with background checks, and he was definitely on board to do that, to pass a clean bill. But unfortunately, he watches Fox News, and he was trying to say, well, it's Democrats who always go too far and try to do like a weapons ban. But
yeah,
we know from the past there's always been clean bills to try to pass for background checks, and it's always just died in the Senate.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you this. You mentioned talking to a Republican in El Paso who watches Fox News. Is that Republican aware of what was in the shooter's manifesto, or has that information not even gotten to him?
I didn't ask.
Okay.
The reason why is because he's a coworker.
Got it.
And he's a supervisor at that. So I didn't want to be confrontational. I believe he is one that will be confrontational. I've seen him before, but I wanted to kind of get his what he thought about it and what he was on board with changing. And so he's on board with more thorough background checks.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's not surprising. And that's one of those things where after the Sandy Hook shooting, there was like 88 or 85% support for that. And, it still didn't get done. So it's actually not that surprising. It seems a lot of Republicans see that as a relatively minor infringement that they would be sort of happy to accept if not that much more is done. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, David, really appreciate your call.
Are you going to go on Joe Rogan anytime soon?
I was on Joe Rogan on June 5th. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did. I loved it.
Are you saying, am I going to be back on?
Yeah, you going to go back on anytime?
I would love to, but there's nothing scheduled right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right, then. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, David. Yep, best of luck down in El Paso.
You.
Thank you. Appreciate that. 617-830-4750. Let's jump over to our caller from the 708 area code. Who's calling today from 708? 708? Maybe we're muted. I don't know.
Yo. Oh, sorry. Hi.
Hey, who's this?
Yeah, my name's Ade. I'm from Chicago.
What's going on?
Right. I wanted to ask. So you've seen the Joe Rogan podcast with Bernie Sanders?
I saw 5 minutes of it. Honestly, I don't know what else happened. I saw that, it had thousands of downvotes, not surprisingly, based on Joe's audience. And I saw that he was on, and I saw the first 5 minutes. Why? Did anything interesting go on?
Oh, no. They just discussed a lot of, I mean, it was really well discussed. You guys should probably watch it. Yeah, I was gonna ask. Do you think other candidates should show up on the Joe Rogan Experience?
It's up to them. I mean, I think so. Andrew Yang did it. Tulsi Gabbard did it. I don't know who else has been on with him, but I mean, it's a huge platform. It's one of the biggest podcasts around. I don't believe any publicity is good publicity, but certainly the Joe Rogan Experience is good publicity, no matter what your political orientation is. I feel like just from listen, even if his audience is like a center-right audience in total, like a lot of people didn't like the stuff I said on there, but it still was hugely beneficial for me. So like, yeah, I think why wouldn't I can't think of any reason why candidates would avoid it.
Interesting.
Can you? I mean, do you think candidates should stay away from his show?
No. I think he has interest. I think he asks great questions, and since they're on the podcast, they can talk as long as they want versus a debate, which is like 15 seconds of response time. So
right.
I think it's very nice.
Oh, okay. But in your question, you sounded a little bit like hesitant, like that maybe people think they shouldn't be on or something.
No, I only sounded hesitant because you didn't watch the entire Bernie the entire Bernie podcast, so that's why I was hesitant on the question
Oh,
at
okay.
that point.
Yeah.
But never mind on that.
No. I mean, as a general, I don't have to watch that specific episode to say huge platform,
Right.
long form, which is great compared to the debates, as you're pointing
Mm-hmm.
out. So yeah, why I think candidates should do it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
All
you
right.
for the call. Appreciate it. Auday from Chicago. Great to hear from you. Let's go next to our caller from the 478 area code. 478. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, David. This is Spencer. Actually from Colorado Springs, 478 in Georgia. But I
Isn't
gotta give a
Colorado
shout out to
Springs
Georgia.
one of the most conservative places in the country?
Dude, let me tell you my life story.
Well, please,
Going from
please don't
Georgia-
tell. I don't know how old you are, but that could be a very long story.
I'm 26 years old.
Okay.
But I'm originally born in Texas, but grew up in Georgia. Obviously, very conservative area. Then about
you're talking
3
about
years
Colorado
ago,
Springs. I thought you said Colorado Springs, Colorado, and then you went to Georgia.
I did.
Oh, you
I
did?
did. I
Okay.
just gotta. Yeah. Okay. So then I moved from Georgia to Dallas, Texas, and of course that's very conservative. Although fairly, I mean, there are a good number of younger kids due to all the colleges down there.
Right.
And so I'm finally, like, my college fund runs out. I want to run to somewhere more liberal and more aligned with my views and a little less humid because I'm a ginger kid and I hate the sun.
Okay.
And I chose Colorado, and turns out Colorado Springs, is the most, I think it's in the top 10 most conservative cities in the U.S. So I've made a very weird choice.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of I don't know if it's like the organizations that sell disaster supplies, like, 80 pounds of mashed potatoes or whatever, but there's some industry that's really big in Colorado Springs. It might be certain types of ministries.
Well,
I don't remember now.
It's the evangelical capital of the world.
Got it.
The
Got
Koch brothers resort here every year. It's full of right-wing money.
Got it.
But to get to my question, I've been a huge foreign policy wonk over my 8 years or so being really politically active, and I always bring up the military budget. I think it's $716 billion this last year, if
All
I'm
right.
not mistaken. But how would you go about cutting that in a way, like, let's say Bernie Sanders gets elected, how would you go about cutting that in a way to not stir up public fear, because the public overwhelmingly supports the military, obviously, and I don't think the vast majority of Americans can or understand, like, all the waste that goes into the military. So what do you think would be the right strategy or the right method of going about removing some of that money from the military budget and reallocating it towards social programs or
Right.
what have you?
Well, here's the thing. So the thing about the military budget is, with the military budget, the debate is not usually, can we cut it? It's, can we slow down the rate at which it's growing? And we need to even restructure that debate before we can even really talk about cutting it. I think that there are two basic ways that we could least controversially start chipping away at it. One is, there are all sorts of programs that dictate the replacement of all sorts of equipment on certain schedules, which are just handouts to the military industrial complex. Let's start to space those out. Like, things that are replaced every 5 years, maybe get replaced every 8. Like, that alone is going to start shrinking one piece of that budget. And then the other thing is, let's actually start shutting down, decommissioning certain bases around the world. I think at the last time I checked, we have like 4 dozen bases in Germany or something like that. I think most Americans would be reasonably satisfied that the U.S. will be safe with only 25 bases in Germany, for example. That's an opportunity where we can literally just start chopping things off. And yes, there are people who work there. We have to figure out, do they lose their jobs or do they get moved elsewhere? These are things that have to be figured out. But if you want to cut the budget, that's going to come with the cutting of some jobs, and we have to accept that.
Yeah, I feel the same way about how people in the healthcare insurance industry are going to have to find new work.
Yep.
If it eventually comes to that. But one other thing relating to that, what do you feel about maybe capping military spending?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you talk about that, so sure, I have no personal opposition to it. The problem is those are the types of things that one party will say we are preemptively limiting ourselves without knowing what the circumstances will be. So like, I agree with you that we spend so much already. It's hard to imagine any situation where a cap will actually endanger us. But you will have someone who says, no, it's sort of like we shouldn't ever take anything off the table. You're taking off the table the possibility that in the future we might need to do X, Y, or Z. I don't agree with that logic, but some politician will make the case, and then it'll become an issue of patriotism, and then the left will lose if that's our approach.
And like I said it earlier, that's my main concern with the average American, their ability to, separate the facts of how much we spend versus like where we spend them. Yeah. But all right, I appreciate you taking my call. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for calling in. Yeah, great to hear from you. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go next to our caller from the 843 area code. Who's calling today from 843?
Hey, this is Chris from Myrtle Beach.
Hey, Chris. I haven't been to Myrtle Beach since I was like 13. Is it still the same, I guess?
Yeah, it's still the same. Grew up down here.
Cool.
But my question for you today is, I appreciate you taking my call, by the way, but my question for you today is, which candidate of all the candidates do you think would be the most likely to defeat Trump in 2020?
I don't have any personal opinion on this beyond what the polls say. The polls say that Biden would do well against Trump. It sounds weird to me. Like, I don't know. He's just very low energy. I don't know how he would deal with Trump's attacks. The polls say Biden would do well. Bernie would do well. I think right now it's looking okay for all of them based on the polls. I don't feel like I have any special insight into it.
Yeah, I like the girl from California, but I'm thinking that Biden probably is the best chance right now. I feel like my uncle.
By girl from California, you mean Kamala Harris?
So what?
You mean Kamala Harris from California?
Yeah.
Okay, the girl from California. Okay, maybe a little condescending, but yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, but yeah, my uncle's actually met Biden. He said he's pretty cool. But that was just my question. And then, what part of the party do you think will be pivotal in showing up for the vote, as far as like people showing out?
Like, who do I think is most reliably going to show up, or who, if they show up, would be most beneficial to the Democratic Party?
Yeah.
Okay, well, those are two different things. I mean, I think, listen, the people that are going to show up, the people that are going to show up are the center-left, older Democrats. They always vote. Okay, I mean, we know the data. They always vote. So they are going to vote. They are more in favor of Biden. The X factor is going to be, does the young progressive wing show up? When Trump was elected, it was like huge activism, a ton of people activated, new people in politics. Will their enthusiasm from 2 years ago carry through to where they actually go and vote in November of 2020? I don't know. That's always the question mark.
Gotcha.
Yep.
But yeah, that was just my questions. Appreciate you taking my call.
All right, Chris from Myrtle Beach. Appreciate it. Hope the water's warm down there and all that stuff. Let's take a quick break. If you're holding, don't hang up. I'll get back to the phones right after the break. Don't hang up if you're holding. New thing, make sure you're following me on Twitch at twitch.tv/David Pakman. I'll be right back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Okay, let's go back to the phones at 617-830-4750. Let's check in with, you know who's on the phone? Ulysses is on the phone, who is a DACA recipient, and it's been almost 6 months since we heard from Ulysses. Hey, Ulysses, how are you?
Hello, I'm good.
Good. What's new?
I just had a renewal on the way.
You did? Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I just got a question for you.
Okay, but you don't sound that happy about the DACA renewal.
No, I am happy. I'm just tired.
Okay.
It's just in the morning.
I gotcha.
Yeah, I just got a question for you.
Sure.
I just wondering, what's like the the main root of anti-Semitism, do you think does it have to do with the killing of Jesus Christ, or do you think it's something else that the
No,
whole like
I don't think it's the
the root
killing
of
of Jesus
anti-Semitism?
Christ. No, listen, Jews have been convenient scapegoats for a really long time, and there's been a feedback loop where the ways in which Jews were discriminated against perpetuated circumstances that led to further discrimination. So, like, let me give you an example. You have all of these conspiracy theories now about Jews conspiring to control certain industries, so on and so forth. That is something that has come from prior discrimination against Jews, where they were not allowed to participate in society in a whole bunch of different areas, which pushed them into fields that require or benefit from sitting around reading and discussing and thinking about stuff. So it's been this very unfortunate circle where Jews have been scapegoated for something, and then their scapegoating and discrimination against them furthers the feedback loop such that there are new things for which they are scapegoated and discriminated against. And I don't think, the entire killing Jesus thing seems like a cartoonish sort of not really practical reason for modern anti-Semitism.
I mean,
Not to mention,
always thought of that.
wasn't it the Romans that killed Jesus? To the extent that Jesus existed, I don't even know.
I mean, yeah, but I don't know too much about the killing. I mean, I don't know. It's just I think that's just like Bible scholars I'd be hearing that stuff from.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and do you also think that Islamic terrorists also hate Jews? Because
many of them are anti-Semitic. Yes, absolutely.
Why is that? Because I'm not understanding that.
You'd have to ask them.
That,
You'd have to ask them. But
supremacists
extremist Islam is not particularly fond of the Jews. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Ulysses. Yeah. Thank you. I really am glad that you got your DACA extension, though. That's a great thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, Ulysses. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Let's go next to our caller from the 506 area code. Who's calling today from 506?
Hello, I'm Thomas from Canada.
Hey, Thomas, what's going on?
I'm a little concerned, and I guess this is an open-ended question, but I'm a little concerned with the stuff I've been reading about Yang's sort of take on climate.
Really?
And the climate crisis. So there's been like a number of articles that say Andrew Yang is not your climate friend. Andrew Yang's report on climate in the debate wasn't like super well. Wasn't super well versed or whatever.
Okay.
And I was just wondering, like, sort of your take on that. He seemed a little pessimistic about the issue and not saying things like we're 10 years too late, etc. And generally, the issue I think previously has been like we can't get politicians on board with climate change. And then Yang, the sort of issue that people are taking with Yang is he's on board, but he's a little too pessimistic about it, or that his way of speaking about it is like super dystopian.
I actually appreciate. I mean, okay, listen. There are candidates who just deny the science and are completely disconnected from reality and say everything's fine, and that's not good. There are candidates who understand the crisis, but seem to think that we're like 5 years away from solving everything if you only elect them, which is not realistic to me. So in a sense, I find refreshing his sort of dystopian, pessimistic look, assuming that he doesn't get over to there's just not even a point in dealing with this because there's no fixing it. That would be a problem. Right. But I actually appreciate that he's being a little more frank. I mean, the imagery he used during the second debate on CNN where he said, we've got to start talking to people about getting to higher ground because there are coastal areas that are going to be implying literally underwater pretty soon. I thought that was actually really great that he was using language that communicated the urgency and sort of crisis that we're in. I think the criticisms might be, does he have the right plan to deal with it? And if maybe your argument is like you feel he's so pessimistic that he's not even focusing enough on climate, is that maybe what I'm hearing?
Well, that's the narrative that I sort of saw in the media.
Yeah.
But as far as my personal take on what he said, like, had I not seen any other opinions on it, if I just watched like his debates, I was like, I was completely on board with you and him. Yeah. Sort of being like, there's an extent of us that's just sort of screwed, but let's take the action that we can do in like higher ground, etc.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I haven't read the piece you're
with
talking about. I should look at the piece you're talking about and see what it argues. But in my study of Andrew Yang and in my conversations that I've had with him, I think I've had him on 3 or 4 times, I've not been alarmed by his view on climate. I think, the biggest criticism of Andrew Yang's view on climate and other issues would be he may see it too much like a consulting project, right? The sort of consultingization of politics is something that maybe Andrew Yang, as someone whose background is entrepreneurship, online tech startups and whatnot, maybe that would be a fair critique. Like the climate issue is a cultural issue. It's a scientific issue. It's many more things than just like, let's get the right consultants to solve the problem. But even that, I'm sort of like steel manning the strongest argument against him.
Yeah, no, like I'm a huge fan of him, and I was just wondering sort of like how, if you had any criticism to the criticism that he sort of took for that climate thing, and we're on the same page. So
yeah, I mean, my reaction to what he said was the same as what you said, but I should read the critique you're talking about, and maybe it does have some merit.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
All right, Thomas from Canada, thank you. Where in Canada are you calling from?
Nova Scotia.
Oh, I've never been there, but I've got some friends. I've got some friends going up there in this weekend, actually.
Oh, nice, cool.
Yeah. Okay, great to hear from you, Thomas. Hope to hear from you again. 617-830-4750 is the number. Let's go to our caller from the 805 area code. I always forget, is 805 Florida Panhandle?
No.
Oh, that must be 850. Yeah, that's you.
Oh. Hello?
Yeah, did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
Hello. Are
yes.
you calling 805 or 850?
Oh, 805. You're on right now. 805 is
805. Gotcha. It's actually Santa Barbara.
Oh,
California.
Santa Barbara. Okay, beautiful. I was there not long ago. I went to the Santa Barbara courthouse. Beautiful building. And then I went out to a restaurant like at the tip of the pier, a seafood restaurant. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, the Harbor.
Yes.
Harbor restaurant.
Fantastic crab cakes.
Yeah.
I highly recommend them.
Oh, yeah, excellent food there.
Yep.
But anyhow, I'm actually currently residing in Grass Valley, Nevada County, California, which is like, Nevada County borders on the state of Nevada. Like an hour and a half.
You don't have us on speakerphone, do you? Just to get that out of the way.
No, I'm on a hardwired.
So hard to believe.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great, David. It's so awesome that I'm actually getting to talk to you.
Yeah.
And Andrew Yang, 2020. But anyhow, I concur with most all of your views. I really like your work. But there's one thing. A bone to pick I guess you could say. You just it makes me question where you stand, because you seem so negative on the left sometimes, and just so fatalistic, like we don't have a chance or something, and it's really depressing to me sometimes.
Okay, let me deal with that. But are you exercising while you're on the phone?
No.
You're not. Okay.
No, I'm sitting on the couch.
You're sitting on the. Okay. Wow. All right. Listen. Here's my thing. I don't think the left is destined to lose. I don't think the left is destined to lose. My pessimism comes from the last 15 years of being too meek and weak on a bunch of different issues, from not taking the ground game of local politics seriously. And I'm just calling it like I see it. I get people emailing me saying, David, you're depressed now. It's not that I'm depressed. I'm just telling you the way I see it.
Right. Well, I'm using it to inspire me more to just, make it happen. We got to get all 3 branches 2020, buddy. I mean,
all 3? You mean the White House, the House, and the Senate? Yeah, we're not getting the Senate in 2020, but maybe in 2022. Listen, I'm going to let you go. I'm glad I've inspired you, but your connection is crazy. I don't know if you're launching a rocket or something, but I'm going to let you go. Something going on there. Okay. All right, let's go to our caller from the 915 area code. Who's calling today from 915?
Hey, David, it's Justin.
Hey,
calling
Justin.
From Monroe, Washington.
How you doing today?
Oh, not too bad. And I was wondering, putting aside all value judgments and stuff like that, the Republicans' take on the shootings, the recent shootings, has been to, of course, blame video games. And their younger voter bloc, especially those that populate like the Donald subreddit and 4chan and stuff.
Sure.
If there's one thing they love more than Donald Trump, it's video games. And I'm wondering how that plays from like a political move to try to alienate those people.
I'm not sure so, okay, let me see if I understand your question. I want to make sure I answer it correctly. You're saying that the same people that love Trump and are in these online alt-right enclaves also love video games. Is that right? That's what you're asserting?
Yes, a lot of them really do.
Okay, and then you're saying that they are being alienated by the discussions of what? Of video games being to blame for the shootings?
Yes.
Oh, listen, I don't know that online alt-righters love video games. I just don't know if that's the case. I'd have to, maybe that's true. I'm not sure. I think that it's wrong to blame video games for the violence. So I think that that is also a problem. But I don't know that I am sort of like lined up with the way you're framing the question such that I can really answer it.
Oh, well, a lot of white nationalist radicalization comes from the idea that young white men don't have any sort of banner to rally around, like, women do or other minorities. And a lot of them took up the tag of gamer as their, oppressed, quote unquote, group. I mean, that's what caused the Gamergate thing and all of that.
I see.
So
in other words, you're sort of
big
suggesting
video
that
game players.
This group under Gamergate, which if you don't know about Gamergate, I wish I was like you. I wish I didn't know about it either. But years ago, there was this thing called Gamergate. And so you're saying that Gamergate became a rallying cry for a group whose identity would not normally see them as the victims of anything in society. They were able to say, we are now the victims, we are the oppressed, we are being targeted, and that gave an identity of a sort, which was then radicalized into the alt-right. Am I sort of understanding?
Yes, sir. And that's a lot of the people that populate these internet forums that are, mostly young white men.
Interesting. Well, listen, this isn't the first I've heard of it, but you're presenting it in a very kind of like cut and dry causal way. I don't know for sure how much there is to that. I'm not discounting it, but it's certainly something I want to look into more.
All right.
Okay, very good. Justin, thanks for the call. Great to hear
from
you. Yes, of course. My pleasure. Great to hear from you. And let's go next to our caller from the 862 area code. Who's calling today from 862?
Hello?
Yes, that's you.
Oh my God, really?
Yes, and we're not on speakerphone, right?
No, the connection's still bad.
Oh, and it just sounds a little echoey. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Chell from New Jersey.
Sorry, what was your name?
Chow.
Chow,
it's
okay.
Like short for Chelsea.
Okay, all right. What's on your mind today?
So I have an observation that I just kind of want your take on.
Okay.
I feel like I am progressives in general. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. I supported him in 2016, and I'm supporting him now. But I kind of feel like I want Marianne Williamson to come and give us all some political therapy, because I don't know. There's like this underbelly of anger and like really toxicity that I feel like a lot of the progressive commentators are like kind of avoiding discussing like what the root cause of it is. And I'm trying to decide whether it's like the hatred that people have for Hillary Clinton is so strong, or is it like the love for Bernie Sanders that is causing like so much chaos? I don't know if you noticed that at all. Like, for example,
listen,
like
I definitely notice anger in the political world. I think a lot of the anger is warranted because we've had ideologues and corporations and their lobbyists basically take over and control every aspect of life and, rape and pillage the lower and middle classes for their benefit. So like, I get the anger. We look at other countries that are as rich as ours, and we see that they have things that, for whatever reason, we're told we can't have at the expense of having this completely overinflated military. So I get the anger. I think that what you're pointing out, where I would agree, is that there is a degree of toxic infighting on the left. And I've talked about it myself, where if you're not on 100% with the people who set the litmus test, you're sort of thrown out as if you're not even a valid person on the side that we're all on. And I think that is the problem on the left that I would most identify. These kind of, if you're not with us on everything, you might as well be against us.
I'm specific. I mean, the left versus right thing is something that's always going to happen, but I'm specifically talking about fighting among progressives.
Yeah.
I see it in politics, like the whole Russia issue, which I don't want to get into because I'm tired of talking about it, thinking about it. But,
yeah, no, but there was a lot of infighting around it. You're right.
Yeah, and there are people that I listen to and I really respect. I get a lot of opinions from you and CYC and Secular Talk and people I really respected who ignore one part of the Mueller report because they think that it will somehow validate, Hillary Clinton's loss. And they ignore the fact that, the Mueller report says that Russia did interfere in some way, and then they just hang on to the part where, they feel like Trump is exonerated, not because they like Trump or they like his presidency or what he's doing, but because they hate Hillary Clinton so much that they don't want to, think about any other possible reason for her loss other than herself, which I would largely agree she lost because of herself. I see it among, candidates, people who have a conservative lean.
Hello? Yes? Okay. Well, all right. Chow, I think she said her name was. Thank you for the call. I agree with you about some of the internal infighting just being really, really bad. All right, that's all the time we have today. We will take calls again. That's it. We'll go to a break. Sorry to everybody I did not get to.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, let's get into audience questions for the week. First question today. Hey, David, will you please do the right thing and simply denounce outrage culture? So listen, the problem is not outrage. Anyone who's paying attention to what is going on and what has been going on in society for the last 50 years, at least economically, culturally, and in many other ways, everything from gross inequality, corporate control of all aspects of society, a government that is in many ways not held accountable for its actions, the military-industrial complex, the pseudo-intellectualism and anti-intellectualism. If you've been paying attention, you should actually be outraged, and that actually makes sense. But the problem is not the outrage itself, in the same way that the problem with so-called social justice warriors is not social justice itself. And these words, these phrases have become dirty words, in great part because the right has really successfully focused in on slivers of movements and blown them up to claim that they are representative big picture. But the real issue that I have with, quote, outrage culture and some of these other things, the social justice warrior movement and whatever, is not the fact that they exist, but how they are wielded. And I'll even go further and include identity politics in that. I've said before, identity politics in and of itself, as a general concept, is not the problem. It's not the problem per se. The problem is that there is a version of identity politics that has gone beyond simply recognizing that, hey, someone's identity is not only important to them, but one's identity does give them a unique perspective in terms of their view of the world and what they can bring to a conversation. And we should recognize that and listen to that. The problem is there are areas where identity politics is wielded like a cudgel. I've talked about this before. In the same way, outrage meaning like anger and disapproval of things. Outrage helps to change those things if it is wielded appropriately and productively. That is what we want. If people weren't outraged about injustices, they'd never change. The problem is when outrage culture leads to counterproductive demagoguery, faux activism that's not actually going to lead to change that the outraged people claim to want. A cartoonish example is, the story I did years ago that went viral on YouTube. To protest racism, some white people were blocked from going to classes one day. That's a totally backwards application of outrage that we should have about different forms of systemic racism that still exists in our society. That was not the right implementation of the outrage into making productive change. In fact, it was completely counterproductive. And then when it comes to media, people should be outraged when discussing the extremist messages that are perpetuated. But then sometimes people are equally outraged, as I've spoken before, just because someone has the audacity to have a different point of view. That is destructive outrage culture, right? When I say, as a progressive, that I want the U.S. out of Venezuela and our involvement in Latin America has been disastrous, but that Maduro and Chavez are not people that have been good for the Venezuelan people, that they have raped and pillaged the economies and societies of Venezuela, all of a sudden I'm an anti-progressive. And people are, quote, outraged at me. It's a small sliver, again, and that's all we're talking about here. Or again, I've mentioned this before. I don't see Tulsi Gabbard as the be-all, end-all presidential candidate that every progressive should support. Wow. All of a sudden, I am the enemy of the progressive movement. People are demanding this, that, and the other thing from me. Or because I think the squad lacks political savvy and sometimes misses the forest for the trees. Outrage because I am now the enemy. Outraged there, and of course I'm biased because it relates to me, that outrage seems out of place and literally counter to the 95 or 99% of issues on which we all agree and should be activists for. So the problems with all of these movements, the problems are not the outrage itself or the social justice or the recognition of identity in people. It's their application and their implementation. And I'll say something further. Corporate media takes advantage of these rifts. Corporate media exploits them and makes them bigger and makes profit off of them while they divide people and prevent actual progress. So we help them to divide us the more we participate in these battles around some of these issues. Understand outrage culture, understand why people should be outraged, and wield these ideas in a responsible way. And most people do. I know I say this often. Most people actually do, and most people recognize identity for the value that it has, and they recognize social justice for what it is that we want it to be. And we have to make sure that we don't allow that sliver that doesn't, or the agents provocateur, agents provocateurs, who are trying to just agitate using fake outrage or fake social justice warrior personas or whatever, and focus on the fact that most of us are united as to what it is that we want to see going forward. Hey, David, do you consider yourself Hispanic? What about Latino? What about an immigrant? Speaking of identity politics, a question about what is my identity. This is like a really, really long thing. Obviously, I'm an immigrant in the sense that I was born in Argentina and I immigrated to the United States. There's this really funny story that I'm reminded of. When I was in middle school, there was an assembly where they announced, we are going to be giving awards. My earpiece fell out here. We are going to be giving awards for achievement by Latino students. And all of a sudden they say, David Pakman, please stand up. And I was genuinely confused. And I went home and said to my parents, are we Latino, in Spanish, of course, the language I grew up and still speak at home. Are we Latino? Are we Hispanic? What's the difference? So here's my take on this question. Not that my identity matters, but because it is the question that was asked. I was born in Argentina and I grew up speaking Spanish. So I am clearly of what I call Hispanic culture or Argentinian culture. That's the culture I was raised in. Now, oftentimes there are racial or ethnic questions tied up in these questions. I was born to a Jewish family who moved to Argentina from Eastern Europe, much like many Jews moved to the United States before World War II. So my ethnicity is Ashkenazi Jewish. In the United States, aside from some white nationalists, I guess, typically Ashkenazi Jews are considered white when it comes to their race or ethnicity. Had I been born in the United States, I would clearly be considered white by the definitions of the census, to the extent that Jews are considered white. So let's maybe dig in a little more to the Hispanic Latino thing. One version of Hispanic versus Latino is that Hispanic is everyone from Spanish-speaking countries in South and Latin America, and that includes Spain and Europe as well. While Latino is all countries that are physically in South and Central America, but not Spain, which is in Europe. And it's more complex because you have places like Haiti and Martinique and Saint Martin. They're sort of not Latino. They're not really Hispanic by any of these definitions. And so it starts to get a little bit complicated. And then Brazil, as a Portuguese-speaking South American country, also sometimes is complex. I actually think that that's basically a distraction for us. I'm definitely a Hispanic immigrant to the U.S. from Latin America. I am definitely ethnically Jewish, and I pass as white in the United States because I'm ethnically Jewish, and I learned English at a young enough age so that I don't have an accent other than some specific words that slip out every once in a while. I tend not to use the term Latino because it does feel a little bit tainted in the context of the immigration debate. But at the same time, I feel like Hispanic is very imprecise because you might be talking about a Guatemalan immigrant or a family of multi-generational wealth in Spain. And politically, it's not just class in terms of money. Politically, those are very, very different things. And the idea that Hispanic encompasses all of it, okay, it just seems extraordinarily broad and imprecise. Anyway, people have often seen me sort of mess with my own identity when guests try to use my perceived identity against me in some way. And I sometimes have joked with my girlfriend, I'm not white, but the truth is I'm Hispanic by culture. I'm ethnically Jewish, which is white in the United States for all intents and purposes. So I would say, yes, I am Hispanic. I guess I am Latino if I have to use that phrase, that term, although I try not to use it because I feel like it is stigmatized in the immigration debate. And I am definitely an immigrant. My passport will confirm that. We've got a great bonus show planned for you today. Please become a member at davidpakman.com/membership. And also, I am now streaming on Twitch, behind the scenes, more casual streams with a lot of audience participation. Follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/davidpakman. And please, if you have Amazon Prime, for free, you can subscribe to my channel with Twitch Prime. It costs you nothing, but it's a paid subscription for us, okay? Just Google how to subscribe to Twitch Prime, and it'll take you, should be like a minute. And that is a really, really great thing for us. Speak to you on the bonus show in just a couple of minutes.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.